Hello and welcome to Must Read Fiction, a place for people who know that life is better with a novel in hand. I'm Erin Popelka, and I am so delighted to be here today with author Daniela Petrova. Welcome.
Hi, Erin. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh, it's truly my pleasure. So, a little bit about Daniela Petrova. She is the author of Her Daughter's Mother, which I have a copy of right here, and the cover is right there on your side as well. She grew up behind the Iron Curtain in Sofia, Bulgaria. Soon after the fall of communism, she moved to New York, where she worked as a nanny and a cleaning lady while studying English at the YMCA. She is a recipient of the Artist Fellowship of the Massachusetts Cultural Council. Her short stories, poems, and essays have been published by the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Review of Books, and Marie Claire, among others. She lives in New York City. So, what a bio and what a book. We'll just flash this book again. I just love this cover and these great colors on the cover. So, let's start there. Let's start with Her Daughter's Mother. Please tell me about the book.
Yes, Her Daughter's Mother is a domestic suspense novel, and it is about a 38-year-old woman who has been struggling with infertility for many years, and she's finally pregnant using a donor egg. She ends up meeting her donor, which is totally against the rules when you're doing an anonymous egg donor cycle. But she does, and the two become fast friends. And when the young woman disappears mysteriously, the pregnant woman becomes the prime suspect in the investigation. And she starts digging on her own, and she's overwhelmed by the secrets she uncovers. And by the end of the book, everything she knew about those she loves has been upended.
Wow. I mean, what a premise, what a story. And it's in so many different layers to it as well. You know, both the forbidden and then the not forbidden, and then this unlikely friendship and these questions of fertility. So interesting. And so this story is narrated by three different characters. And so I was hoping you could speak a little bit about what did you learn about each of the characters through their narration?
So I learned a lot. I was really surprised because originally I wrote the first draft in third person, and I reached a point where I was stuck and I didn't know how to continue. And eventually I thought that in a story like this, I need to give voice to the three main characters: the woman who is pregnant, the donor whose genes the baby will inherit, and the father. And so I started writing in first point of view, alternating chapters between the three, and that just opened up the entire story. And it's really basically the characters took over their own stories and they started telling their own stories, and I learned so much about each one of them. For example, with the donor, the young woman Katya, I had some initial idea of what her character would be like, but she surprised me. Her voice was so powerful, and she took over her own story, and it went in a very different direction than I had planned.
Oh, it's so fun when characters do that, when you've really created such an authentic character that they take charge of their own story, and you really just have to follow where they go. So kudos to you for following your character's lead. Were there some surprises clearly along the way when you followed Katya, some of the things that she threw your way?
Yes, absolutely. There were a lot of surprises, and I learned to admire her, and she became so real to me, and I was so fascinated by the direction she was taking the story in. And yeah, there were a lot of surprises, especially the ending. She was insisting on, she had her fate in her hands, and yeah.
Oh, so we no spoilers. We definitely want to make sure
Yeah.
we get to the ending, but what a great little cliffhanger that definitely makes those pages want to turn. And and so I'm also curious, sort of with those three viewpoints, I imagine that also in the crafting of the book, and certainly with a suspense novel in terms of who knows what and how that gets crafted, how did those different viewpoints help with the structure of the book?
So the structure was very complicated. Yes, you're absolutely right. And to be honest, the first draft wasn't that hard because I started putting the pieces together and they were each taking their story in a certain direction and it all fell into place. But once I started revising, that's when the problems began because I had difficulty fitting. Once I changed something, then it was very hard because even just introducing a new character meant that the sequence will be out of place. So all the different chapters, I had put so much effort into putting them, positioning them in the right places, and I would start moving the chapters around, writing new chapters, and then I would realize, oh my God, I'm giving away some of the puzzle too early, something that was in the right place in the first draft. Now it was no longer working, moving it 3 chapters earlier. So yes, the revision was really difficult.
Oh, it sounds like it. And certainly like both the timeline of it and who knows what when and how to do that to keep the tension and the plot. And oh yes, what a juggling act.
Very, very much so, very much so. And you're right, if that wasn't a suspense novel, maybe it would be easier and it wouldn't be so important when you tell a certain part of the puzzle. But with a suspense novel, I had to make sure that I don't give away too early.
Sure, sure, sure. And so speaking of the characters, some of your characters have ties to Bulgaria, which is where you were born. So tell me more about what it was like to write Bulgaria into your fiction, and how does your home country influence your creative process?
That was wonderful. I mean, I moved to the States 24 years ago, and so it was relieving a lot of the experiences, especially through Katya, who is the young woman in the story. She is a foreign student at Columbia University, and so I was relieving a lot of or rewriting my own history because my experience going to college was very different from hers. I had to work full time. Whereas she is just a student, a foreign student, and she comes here and goes to school right away. So I really enjoyed writing all these aspects and her Bulgarian background. I have a lot of scenes that talk about Bulgaria, and also there's some Bulgarian conversation and small things like the kind of coffee we drink in the morning. A lot of details that were very dear to me. So it was wonderful writing them into the story.
Sure. I'm curious, what kind of coffee do you drink in the morning?
It's Turkish coffee. Not anymore, really. The young people don't drink it, but I grew up with it, and it's very thick and leaves a lot of leaves a thick sediment at the bottom of the cup. So in the old days, there were a lot of women who were sort of like fortune tellers. They would turn the cup upside down, and so then they would wait for it to dry a little bit, and it creates all these different shapes and patterns, and they would read your fate looking at the cup.
Oh,
So
beautiful. Which I mean, not to like draw too many metaphors, but is such a similar process to being a fiction writer and writing a book, right? You have all of these details and these characters and swirling together. You get to like decide the fate. So, yeah, so certainly it sounds like that's been part of your life for a long time.
yes, very much so. So yeah, I love that aspect of writing the Bulgaria story into my suspense novel.
Sure, sure. Oh, that's so interesting. And along similar lines, so you know, as you mentioned, you've been in the States for 24 years and you moved here in your early 20s. And you didn't know very much English at the time. So I'd love to, yes, I'd love to learn more. And this book is in English and you wrote this book in English. So how does it feel to write in a language that you learned relatively late in life? And like, what does the knowledge of multiple languages do for your writing?
Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of challenges, obviously, writing in a second language, and it took me a lot of years. You're right, I barely spoke any English when I first came to the States 24 years ago, but I took a lot of English classes and read a lot of books that I have already read in Bulgarian to help me with the language. So then I went to undergraduate school, graduate school. So it's been such a long time. I started thinking in English early on. I mean, within the first 6 months, I was already thinking in English, which was quite challenging because my vocabulary was very limited. So I felt so dumb, right? In my own head, I couldn't find words to express how I felt. So, but at this point, it's the language I think in, the language I read, the language I write. I studied a lot of writing over these past 2 decades and always in English. So even though I started writing back in Bulgaria as a kid, I only started learning the craft of writing in English, right, when I was here in the States. So that's the only way I know how to write.
Sure. Oh, that's so interesting. Both because you're right, like vocabulary provides sort of a limiting force, but that you learn to write in the language of English. Like, would it feel like incredibly awkward if you tried to write your next novel in Bulgarian? Like, would that?
Absolutely. There is no way I can do that. I
Yeah.
mean, actually, we are working on the Bulgarian translation now, and it's quite a challenge, to be honest. Yes, it's been so long for me. And languages evolve, right? So, in those past 2 decades, the Bulgarian language has evolved a little bit. And so, yeah, it would be impossible for me to do it.
Yeah. So are you working with a translator then for the
Yes.
Bulgarian? Yes. Yes.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly. So,
Oh, so
yeah,
interesting. That's great that it'll be back in your home country, that it's getting that translation.
absolutely. I'm super excited, and my family can read it. My grandparents, especially my grandfather, is 95. So I so want for them to see it and be able to read it.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And that actually ties perfectly into my last question, which is, your her daughter's mother. I'll just keep flashing this book because I just want to make sure, must readers, please do check it out. So it is officially launched into the world. It's been getting lots of praise already. So congratulations, of course, and also tell me a little bit more about how you're going to celebrate bringing the book into the world. So your grandparents will get to read it in Bulgaria. What else are you doing to celebrate the book?
God, well, we had the book launch last night, and that was a fantastic celebration with all my friends and family. And I guess I'll be doing a lot of other events, both here in New York and around the country, going to LA and Rhode Island and Connecticut, Washington, D.C. So a lot of events to celebrate. And yes, I don't know really, to be honest. I'm still kind of in shock.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and it's so great to have that moment of, so much of writing the book you do on your own and in your own head, and all that drafting process you were talking about, the first draft to what's now, in the world as a published book. So exciting to finally engage with readers who can hold it in their hands, who can read it, who can ask you questions and engage with it after such a solo process for so long. I imagine that's got to be a little bit surreal.
Absolutely surreal. Yes. Yes.
Excellent. Well, enjoy that process. I hope that you have a fantastic time bringing her daughter's mother into the world. Must readers, please do check it out. And Daniela Petrova, thank you so very much for writing such a great book and for talking to us about it.
Thank you so much, Erin. That was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Truly my pleasure too. Thank you.
Thank you.